نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اقتفى أثره واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. فإنشاءالله we'll continue with reading from the book known as Al-Musannaf لأبي بكر عبد الله ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Shaybah rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 235 after the Hijrah. And we're in the section of his book that deals with purification, Kitab al-Tahara, the section of the book that deals with purification. And the author is mentioning some of the issues or the statements of the Salaf from the Sahaba and the Tabi'een regarding various things that it has been mentioned or discussed regarding the nullification of wudu. And from the things that we've mentioned are things that are well known, things that are common, whether they are accurate or inaccurate. There's a commonality in the shared awareness of a lot of the things that we've mentioned so far. The author is going to begin to discuss some of the things that are less common in the shared awareness of people regarding if it is something that nullifies wudu or not. And these are a lot of times are those statements that individuals might hear when they're new shahadas, or they're received their Islamic education originally from individuals who might have been steeped in madhahib and methodological classes of education, etc. So these are going to be issues where there is some strangeness to why is this even a concern? Why is this even something that required a conversation? And it's because some people held these opinions. And we'll discuss it a little bit more as we go through. The first topic that we have in this matter is this chapter is regarding a man or a person touching their armpit. Should they make wudu? If a person touches their armpit, is it something that requires them to perform a wudu? And as we mentioned before, my view of this issue is that a lot of the time, these things that are what we would call nowadays unhygienic, right? Touching your groin, touching your backside, touching the sweaty crevices of your body, touching your feet, touching your armpits. These are things that a person might consider to be unhygienic. And the environment that they lived in was an environment that there was a shared interaction amongst them. They ate from the same plate, right? Nowadays, we live a lifestyle, most of us, where everybody eats from their own plate and drinks from their own glass. And, we don't share things the way that they might have shared things in the past. We have an influency, for one, right? A husband and a wife don't share the same garment. They don't share the same miswak. They don't share the same toothbrush. And this is partly because of our affluency. Even, sometimes the most impoverished of us, especially here in the West. And sometimes it's because of what we find to be repulsive from this shared relationship amongst ourselves, right? Children who are turned off if their parent drinks from the same glass, or to drink from the same glass as their parent, or a husband and wife. At times you find them having this same repulsion of, sharing certain things. And whether that is because of the culture that we were raised in, or just time and, or because of the status of people and the way people conduct themselves nowadays, to be honest, these are things that in the past, they didn't find such an aversion to. But when somebody would do some of these actions that in such a shared environment would be considered unhygienic, the expectation would be that, okay, you rubbed your dirty underarms, right? You've been sweating, you're hot, and you've touched your dirty underarms, and now you want to dip your fingers into the tray of food. Go wash your hands. And as I'm saying, in my opinion, that is where this conversation of should a person make wudu because of these actions sprouted from. You're going to wash your hands. You're going to be clean. Islam, at-tahur shatrul iman. Cleanliness is half of faith. So an individual is going to be clean. And if you're going to wash your hands, Why not make an intention? Why not do this action with a niyyah? And if you're going to wash your hands with a niyyah, why not do it according to the sunnah? Why not make an action that is an actual act of worship in this regard? And so you would see Salaf encouraging somebody that if you're going to touch your armpits, make wudu, because you're going to wash your hands because you're a clean person. You're not a disgusting individual. And if you're going to wash your hands, how much more work is it to just, throw some water in your mouth and spit it out, wipe your head and wash your feet as well? Why not? Why not make a wudu from it? And so is it that people actually thought that these actions were obligatory? We'll find a lot of times that the statements of the Salaf, they don't even raise to the level of it being something that is even understood to be obligatory. It just might be something that they recommended. And so that's my position on why these issues became issues. Make wudu for touching your armpit. Make wudu for shaving your hair. Because you're going to wash yourself anyway. But in my opinion, with the passage of time and with the encouragement from a madhab about this topic or that topic, as we know, those of us who might have studied, some of the progression of madhahib, a lot of times a scholar in a madhab would recommend something or dislike something that the students, because of how great they deem this scholar, would often raise it to the level of impermissibility or obligation. When in the statement of the original author or the statement of the original imam, it didn't reach such a level. And like this, with the passage of centuries, those things became something that are expected, and the truth behind the matter often gets lost to the common person. And that's why it's so important for us to reconnect ourselves with the statements of the Salaf, because a lot of times we'll see that even the things that we find to be the strangest of opinions, there was a Salaf who had an opinion similar to it. But did they adopt or believe in that opinion the same way the later generations have adopted and believed in that opinion? And more often than not, we'll find it to be the case that the answer is no. So this issue regarding a man or a person touching their armpit, should they make wudu? The verifier, Sheikh الشثري حفظه الله تعالى, he said سيأتي مثل هذا الباب رقم 65 و100 وفيه أخبار أكثر مما هنا. The verifier, he said, this topic will also be mentioned again. The author is also going to mention this topic later on in chapter number 165. Right now we're in chapter 63. When we get to chapter 165, Ash-Shithri Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he's saying that the author is going to mention this topic again with more narrations than he brings here. And this perhaps is why the verifier, Sheikh Ash-Shithri Hafidhullah, doesn't mention the positions of the four madhahib regarding it in this location. And so that's something we'll look out for and look forward to when we get to that chapter, chapter 165. As far as the narrations in this topic, the author, he says, حدثنا ابن علي and عبيد الله ibn excuse me. The author, he says, حدثنا ابن علي and عبيد الله ibn al-Aizar and عبيد الله ibn al-Aizar and طلق ibn Habib أنه قال رأى عمر بن الخطاب رجلا حك إبطه أو مسه فقال قم فاغسل يديك أو تطهر. He said that Ibn Ulayya narrated to us on the authority of Ubaydullah ibn al-Aizar, on the authority of Talq ibn Habib. Talq ibn Habib, who said that Umar ibn al-Khattab, he saw a man scratch his armpit or wipe his armpit. And so he said to that man, get up and wash your hands or go clean. Get up and go clean, right? And so, as we said, this shows us, right? It's not talking about wudu as a obligation, but it's a statement that Umar made to this individual. And it could be, as what we mentioned, due to the lack of hygienics or a deficiency in the individual's cleanliness. He says, حدثنا ابن علي and Layth and Mujahid. أنه قال عمر من نقى أنفه أو حك إبطه توضأ. He says that Ibn Ulayya narrated to us on the authority of Layth, on the authority of Mujahid, who said that Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he said that whoever cleans his nose, whoever picks his nose, right? Whoever picks inside of his nose or scratches his underarms or his armpits, make wudu. Whoever picks their nose or scratches their armpits makes wudu. And so this statement is a little bit more clearer from Umar that he's telling the person to make a wudu. But as we see, it doesn't reach it to it being an obligation. But we see that, and this is a benefit from the Salaf, right? Everything, right? It's like life lessons. It's some things that might be obvious to us, but you have to remember that people back then, their standards of hygiene were way different than ours. At a time when Europe was living with sewage flooding the streets, at a time when they didn't know enough to wash off the utensils they would use in surgery. Till recently, when we talk about in the Wild West, more people died from the surgery than the actual wounds they suffered, as some of them mentioned. Here was the Muslims and the religion of Islam encouraging this hygiene, and the statements having these statements that if I told you 4 out of 5 doctors said you should wash your hands anytime you pick your nose, you would find it to be from the most, important things of modern medicine and the things that you encourage your kids to do with instruction and with statements, brush for 2 minutes, when Corona and Fauci, you would put these people who make these statements on such high pedestals nowadays. But here we are, the Muslims, with statements from the Salaf that said these things already. And it's as if we don't recognize their value and their advancement and their leadership in these fields, right? Everything wasn't a dars in Aqidah, even though Aqidah is the primary issue. You would see they had lessons in medicine, lessons in hygiene, lessons in sociology. I can't pronounce the word. They were leaders in all of these fields. And so Umar is telling the individual, whoever picks their nose or wipes or scratches their armpit, make wudu. He says, حدثنا خلف ابن خليفة عن ليث عن مجاهد عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما أنه قال ليس عليه وضوء في نتف الإبط. He said that Khalaf ibn Khalifa narrated to us on the authority of Layth, on the authority of Mujahid, on the authority of Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, who said, there is not upon the person who plucks their underarm hairs any wudu. There is no wudu upon the person who plucks his underarm hair. Meaning, when part of the hygiene, part of the fitrah is to pluck the underarm hair. And there's no harm or there's no wudu necessary on the person when he's cleaning himself like this, that he has to make a wudu after doing so. Now, he says, حدثنا ابن إدريس عن هشام عن الحسن أنه سئل عن الرجل يمس إبطه أو ينتفه فلم يرى به بأسا أن لا يدميه إلا أن يدميه. He said that Ibn Idris narrated to us on the authority of Hisham ibn al-Hasan. Ibn Idris narrated to us on the authority of Hisham, on the authority of Al-Hasan, yani Hasan al-Basri, who was asked about a man who wipes his underarms or his armpits or plucks them. Hasan said that he didn't see any problem with that unless it caused bleeding. He didn't see any problem with touching your armpit or plucking your hairs, i.e. there's no wudu necessary, unless it caused bleeding. I.e., in that circumstance, we would go back and default to the positions of the scholars regarding an individual who bleeds. But Al-Hasan was saying if a person just touched or plucked their hairs from their armpit, there's no problem unless it results in bleeding. He says, حدثنا أبو أسامة عن ابن عون عن محمد أنه قال هؤلاء يقولون من مس إبطه أعاد الوضوء وأنا لا أقول ذلك ولا أدري ما هذا. He says that Abu Usama narrated to us on the authority of Ibn Aoun, on the authority of Muhammad, who said that, and Allah knows best, this is Muhammad ibn Sirin, right? We know Ibn Aoun, Abdullah ibn Aoun, al-Basri, and we talked about him in Muhammad ibn Sirin in Sharh Usul I'tiqadi Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, al-Lalakai. On the authority of Muhammad ibn Sirin, who said, these people say whoever wipes their armpit, they must repeat their wudu. And I don't say that. That is not my opinion. And I don't know what that is, right? I've never heard such a thing. I don't know what that is, where they got that from. This is the statement of Muhammad ibn Sirin. And we see that, you know, it's something that Umar said to do. And so we see the people who adopted this view, and they would adopt this view. Umar said to do it. He's somebody who's knowledgeable. I'm going to make a wudu because he said, but did he say make wudu, or did he just say wash your hands and clean yourself? And somebody narrated it with the meaning of go make wudu. Or when he said go make wudu, did he mean it was obligatory, or was it a suggestion? And like this, as the information is traveling from one city to another, somebody heard from somebody that heard that Umar said this, who was in Medina and died early. By the time you get to Muhammad ibn Sirin, he's like, I don't know what this is. I never heard that before. And so we see how this information, right? But if somebody adopted that position, they might eventually lead them to saying that it's necessary. But Muhammad ibn Sirin, he's saying these people say whoever wipes his armpit, then he must repeat his wudu. And I don't agree with that. I don't say such things. And I don't know what that is to begin with. I've never heard such a thing. Lastly, in this narration, he says, حدثنا أبو معاوية أن الأعمش أن مجاهد أن عبد الله بن عمرو أنه كان يغتسل من نتف الإبط. He says that Abu Muawiyah narrated to us on the authority of Al-A'mash, on the authority of Mujahid, on the authority of Abdullah ibn Amr, and Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, that he used to wash from plucking his armpits. When he would pluck his armpits, he would bathe. He would bathe after plucking his armpits. Right? This is just something that could be a person's personal norm. Like myself, when I shave, or if I cut my hair, or if I, do something of that nature, it's just default that you go and take a shower after that. But does that mean it's necessary? Does that mean wudu is necessary or bathing is necessary? Not necessarily. Right? But we see where the origin of this information is, and how some people might have eventually adopted that doing this action of making a wudu from touching one's armpits is necessary. That is that chapter. The next chapter is something similar, since he ended with plucking the armpits and how Amr ibn al-As would bathe after doing so. Then the next chapter, he says, الرجل يأخذ من شعره يتوضأ. If a person removes some of their hair, should they make a wudu? The Sheikh al-Shithri, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that al-jamhur ومنهم الأربعة على عدم وجوب الوضوء بذلك. The majority of the scholars, and from them are the four imams, are of the view that it is not obligatory to make wudu because of this. If a person cuts their hair or shaves or trims, there's no wudu necessary for removing some of your hair. But he's going to mention some of the narration of the Salaf in this regard. He says, حدثنا هشيم قال أخبرنا يونس قال أخبرنا يونس أن الحسن في الرجل يأخذ من شعره ومن أظفاره بعدما يتوضأ قال لا شيء عليه. He says that Hushaym narrated to us. He said that Yunus informed us. He said about Al-Hasan, who said regarding a man who removed some of his hair or his nails after having performed wudu. Al-Hasan said there's nothing upon him. Right? The person who removes their hair or their nails after they've already made wudu, Al-Hasan al-Basri is saying they don't have to do anything. They don't have to go and make another wudu. Ibn Abi Shaybah, he says, حدثنا هشيم قال أخبرنا حجاج أن الحكم وعطاء قال لا شيء عليه فلم يزده إلا الطهارة. He says that Hushaym narrated to us, he said that Hajjaj informed us on the authority of Al-Hakam and Ata, right? Two of the scholars of the Tabi'een. The two of them said that regarding this person, the person who removes his hair and clips his nails, there's nothing upon him. There's no responsibility. There's no obligation upon him for doing so. And he hasn't increased himself in anything other than purity. Shaving your hair and clipping your nails is an act of purification. So why would an act of purification require you to go purify yourself again? When you clip your nails or shave your head, this is an act of purification. You've increased on your purity. So that's a good statement from Al-Hakam and Ata. Ibn Abi Shayba, he says, حدثنا الشريك عن عطاء عن سعيد بن جبير أنه قال هو طهور وبركة. He says that Sharik narrated to us on the authority of Ata, on the authority of Sa'id ibn Jubair. Sa'id ibn Jubair, he said that it is an act of purification and it is a barakah. It is a means of obtaining blessing. Shaving your head and clipping your nails is an act of purification and it is a means of obtaining blessing. And we can see this as it relates to the Hajj. The individual who performs Hajj, what does he do after he comes out of his ihram? He shaves his head. He clips his nails. He removes the filth of these actions after his sins had been forgiven, after his slate has been wiped clean. He purifies himself from the physical things. And likewise, he accomplishes this blessing of doing so. And so that's a nice correlation between this action, right? If a person asks, what is the significance of shaving your head and clipping your nails and things like that after coming out of ihram, then you could look at the statement of Sa'id ibn Jubair here and say, huwa tahurun wa barakah. It is an act of purification and a means of obtaining blessing. He says, حدثنا حفص ibn غياث and حفص ibn Abi Dawud and Asim أنه قال رأيت أبا وائل أخذ من شعره ثم دخل المسجد فصلى. He says that Hafs ibn Ghiyath narrated to us on Hafs ibn Abi Dawud and Asim, who said, I saw Abu Wa'il taking some of his hair off, right? Shaving his head, trimming his head, and they are trimming his hair, not his head, trimming his hair. And then he entered the masjid and offered salah. Afterwards, he went to the masjid and offered salah. Right? How is this applicable, right? And nowadays, the individual goes to the barbershop. The brother's in the barbershop. He got his hair cut, and they call the adhan. He can go to the masjid, right? He doesn't have to go make wudu. He doesn't have to go home and bathe. He can go straight to the masjid. Well, what about the hair that's loose? Maybe that hair is going to drop. Maybe he's going to drop some of it in the masjid when he makes sujood. The small hairs, the dust hair is going to fall off of his shoulders. That's nasty, akhi. Somebody else is going to come and make sujood in that spot. They might get a piece of hair in their mouth, on their tongue. Akhi, it's adi. Right? Here, the statement of Asim is that I saw Abu Wa'il from the Tabi'in. Abu Wa'il, a Sahabi. Wallahu ta'ala anhu. He took some of his hair off, right? He shaved some of his hair, trimmed some of his hair, and then he entered the masjid and offered salah. He entered the masjid and offered salah. He says, حدثنا المحاربي and Hajjaj and Abi Ja'far وعطاء والحكم والزهري قالوا ليس عليه وضوء. He said that Al-Muharibi narrated to us on the authority of Hajjaj, on the authority of Abi Ja'far, as well as Ata, as well as Al-Hakam, as well as Az-Zuhri. All of them said this individual doesn't have to do anything. There's no wudu necessary on this individual. Laysa alayhi wudu. There's no wudu necessary on this individual. And then lastly, he says, حدثنا عيسى بن يونس and التيمي and أبي المجلز قال أنه قال رأيت بن عمر أخذ من أظفاره فقلت له أخذت من أظفارك ولا تتوضأ قال ما أكيسك أنت أكيس ممن سماه أهله كيسا. And Allah knows best, is this sarcasm or is it an honest statement? But it gives the feel of sarcasm. It says, حدثنا عيسى بن يونس, that Isa ibn Yunus, he narrated to us on the authority of At-Taymi, on the authority of Abi Mijlas, who said, I saw Ibn Umar trimming his nails. And so I said to him, you're trimming your nails and you don't make wudu? To which he said, how clever are you? You're very perceptive. You're very clever. You're more clever than the one his mother named him clever, right? It's a phrase that they say, Anta akyasu mimman sammahu ahluhu kayisa. You're more clever than the one who his people called him kayis, right? You're very perceptive. Look how smart you are. You're very perceptive. You're more perceptive than the one who his family called him perceptive, right? Like how we might say in English, you must be a detective, how you figured that out, right? That's the way it comes off to me. It could be an honest statement. Mashallah, you noticed what I'm doing. You know, most people, they look at a scholar, they don't pay any attention to him. They don't consider their every little actions, but no, not you. You're very perceptive. You're more perceptive than the one who his family called them perceptive, right? Because you notice even the little things that I do. And that might be the way that it's intended, right? That gives a good meaning as well. And it could also be, and Allah knows best, sarcasm, right? You see me trimming my nails and not making wudu, right? Isn't that obvious? Why would you even think I would make wudu? You're very perceptive. Allahu ta'ala alam. Wa ala kulli hal subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Inshallah, next time we'll pick up with the chapter, those who say that an individual should repeat their wudu, and those who say that he should just run water upon himself. This next chapter relates to this chapter, so let's go ahead and take it, because this is, okay, so the last chapter was about if a person removes or trims their hair, should they make wudu? And so this chapter is about those who say the person should repeat their wudu, because everybody he mentioned up until now were the people who said you don't have to make a wudu. So here is the statements of those who say that he must repeat his wudu, or they say it's sufficient to just run water over it, right? You don't have to make a wudu, but you have to run water over it. And so he says, حدثنا المحاربي and Layth and Mujahid and Ali في الرجل يأخذ من شعره ومن أظفاره قال يعيد الوضوء. He says that Al-Muharibi narrated to us on the authority of Layth, on the authority of Mujahid, on the authority of Ali, regarding a man who trims some of his hair or his nails. Ali said he must repeat the wudu. Yu'id al-wudu. He should repeat his wudu. He says, حدثنا هشيم and Mughira and Ibrahim أنه قال يجري عليه الماء. He says that Hushaym narrated to us on the authority of Mughira, on the authority of Ibrahim, who said he should pour water over it. Right? If you trim your hair, if you cut your hair, you wash your hair after that. And this goes back to what we talked about, right? Those loose strands of hair, those follicles that stay on your body. One, it's going to cause you an annoyance because they're going to itch. If you don't bathe, they're going to be on your shoulders and on your back and on your body. Likewise, depending on how you shave, that hair will fall off on you, right? If you ever shaved and then you touch your hands and you see you got all the loose hairs in your hand. If you're eating from the meal with somebody, or if you go into the masjid and you rub your head, all of those loose follicles will get off into the masjid. And these are things that people would consider unhygienic. And so you have people like Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu saying you should make wudu, because in making wudu, you're going to wipe your head and clean it off. Or you have people like Ibrahim al-Nakha'i rahimahullah ta'ala saying you should at least pour water over your head if you do that. He says, حدثنا أبو معاوية and الشيباني and Hamad and Ibrahim أنه قال يجري عليه الماء. He mentions another chain. He says that Abu Muawiyah narrated to us on the authority of Al-Shaybani, on the authority of Hamad, on the authority of Ibrahim, and Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, who said he should pour water over it. He should pour water over it, i.e. his head. He says, or the spot that he took the hair from. He says, حدثنا أبو داود الطيالسي and شعبة and يعلى بن مسلم and Mujahid. في الرجل يأخذ من أظفاره قال يعيد الوضوء. He said that Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi, rahimahullah ta'ala, narrated to us on the authority of Shu'bah, on the authority of Ya'la ibn Muslim, on the authority of Mujahid, regarding a man who clips his nails or trims his nails. He said, Mujahid said, he should repeat wudu. If you trim your nails, Mujahid has a statement similar to Ali, that you should repeat wudu. He says, حدثنا يزيد بن هارون and مسعر and حبيب بن أبي ثابت and Mujahid أنه قال إذا قلم أظفاره توضأ. He says that Yazid ibn Harun narrated to us on the authority of Mis'ar, on the authority of Habib ibn Abi Thabit, on the authority of Mujahid, who said, if you clip your nails, make wudu. If you clip your nails, make wudu. Allahu a'lam, what's the justification that they use for that? Maybe they consider that the breaking of the nail is like the breaking of the skin and the causing of blood, even though the nails don't bleed. I don't know what their justification for the nails being clipped, except that they might consider it like, because clipping the nails is an act of purification, like cleaning out filth. Maybe they compare it to using the toilet, how that is an act of purification and cleaning out filth. And so they compare it like that. Allahu ta'ala alam. He says that حدثنا وكيع عن عمر ibn ذر عن أبيه أنه قال يحدث لذلك وضوءا أو يحدث لذلك وضوءا. He says that Waki' narrated to us on the authority of Umar ibn Dhar, on the authority of his father, who said he should produce a new wudu for doing so. If somebody clips their nails or here shaves their head, they should produce a new wudu for doing so. He says, حدثنا غندر and شعبة and الهيثم and حماد في الرجل يقلم أثاره ويأخذ من لحيتي قال يمسحه بالماء. He says that Gundar narrated to us on the authority of Shu'bah, on the authority of Al-Haytham, on the authority of Hamad, regarding a man who clips his nails or trims his beard. Like, wait a second, Hamad, what do you mean a man who trims his beard? I thought trimming the beard was haram. This shows us that from the Salaf are those that had the opinion that trimming what is above or below the qabdah, right? Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he used to have this position, whether it's, some of them say it was during Hajj or Umrah, or just generally speaking. Some of them would say that if the beard gets longer than a fist length, you should trim it. And some of them used to consider the person who had the long beard, right? The biker beard, the long beard that reaches down to their belly or something like that. They used to consider this person a fool. Some of the Salaf would consider a person who had a long beard like that to be foolish. And they would suggest that a person trims their beard if it got longer than a fistful. While other Salaf, they would say, no, leave the beard. And this is the general statement of the Prophet ﷺ, and the more apparentness of his statement, to just leave the beard. Don't touch it at all. Don't take away from it. If it grows long, let it grow long. But that is room for disagreement. And here, Hamad is saying whoever trims their nails or trims their beard, whoever clips their nails or trims their beard, then they should wipe that area with water. So if you clip your nails, then run some water on your hand. And this could also be from the wisdom that we know we've been prevented from biting our nails. And some of the physicians, they mentioned that the nails, the dirt and the filth that gets in under the nails is some of the worst and the most, dangerous that a person can have. That's why it's so encouraged to wash your hands. And so maybe if an individual trims their nails, it exposes that area where the dirt was trapped under it. And so it's a good practice to wash your hands so that filth and that dirt, which is from the worst bacteria or dirt that could be, leaves your hand, because trimming the nail doesn't necessarily remove the filth. And so this is an example of some of the wisdom of the Salaf, that if you clip your nails, then wash your hands. And likewise, if you trim your beard, then pass some water on top of it. Wipe it down with water. And that water, when you trim your beard, for example, it will grab those loose hairs in it, right? It will grab those loose hairs, make them stick to your hand, so they're not coming off in undesirable places. And likewise, just from the aspect of when you trim your nails, passing that water on it, comforts it. You might trim too hard, or there might be jagged edges, and passing that water over it, you find often that it smooths it down and it alleviates some of the irritation that might come from trimming the nail. And if you go too far, it prevents that dirt and bacteria from getting into any open sore as well. He says حدثنا المحاربي عن الشيباني عن حماد في الرجل يقص أظفاره قال يغسلها بالماء. He says that Al-Muharibi narrated to us on the authority of Al-Shaybani, on the authority of Hamad, regarding a man who clips or who trims his nails. He said he should wash it with water. So these are the statements of those people who held the position that if you're going to trim your hair or cut it, you should make wudu, or you should at least wash it down with water as it relates to trimming the hair or the nails. And the previous chapter was regarding those who said it was not necessary. And like this, we see that there's disagreement, even if the four imams are with the majority in the fact that it does not necessitate a purification. So we'll stop at that amount, inshallah. Next time, we'll pick up with the chapter, Man kana idha bala lam yamassu dhakarahu bil ma'. Those who, if they urinate, they would not pour any water on their penis. Those who, if they urinated, would not pour any water on their penis. Now, and we'll talk about what is meant by that when we get to it. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. نعم. هكذا إن شاء الله. We ask Allah to increase us in knowledge. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إلى علمنا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.